Hey, this is Zach from mycodeteacher.com. Today we're going to talk about UIKit Components, specifically the inputs and values section of the UIKit library. Those include UI buttons, UI progress views, sliders, text fields, UI segmented controls, UI switches, and UI labels, all of which I will be discussing today. So the first thing I'm going to discuss is going to be the most complicated, and it's going to be a UI slider. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually open up a new project, and we're going to put a UI slider into Interface Builder, and we're going to customize the actual sides and thumb image of this UI slider. So let's go ahead and start by opening up our Xcode here. Go to New Project, and we're going to call this, we're going to make this a view-based application. We'll go ahead and call this UIKit, and let's go ahead and right away open up our resources folder, and we'll go to the view controller nib file here. Okay, so right away we're going to go ahead and put in a UI slider into this view. So all of your UIKit components are located in the library. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the inputs and values section of the library. As mentioned, all of the components are right here, and we're going to go ahead and drag in a slider, and we can make it as long or as short as we want. And so we've got the slider in here now. We'll be able to customize this blue part right here with an image, and this white part right here with an image. So the blue part represents the highlighted area, the white part represents the area that could be highlighted, and the big circle in the middle is the thumb image. So we'll be able to customize all of that. So in order to do that, we're going to need to make an IB outlet, which is connecting this UI slider with the code, and we'll be able to adjust its properties based off of this. So go ahead and open up your classes group here, and we'll go straight into the UIKit view controller.h file. And we're going to make an IB outlet called custom slider, and it's going to be of type UI slider, and like I said, we're going to call this custom slider. Now go ahead and save, and we'll go back into our interface builder, and we're going to go ahead and connect the outlet. So we're going to go into File. Now if you go into your inspector, you'll notice that the connections, which is the second tab, shows the custom slider IB outlet right here. We'll just take this and we'll drag it right over to the custom slider. Okay, so we've now connected our slider with the code, and what we're going to need to do now is, in an initializing function, we're going to need to set the properties of this slider so that it contains images. Now currently in our project we don't have any images, so we're going to need to go ahead and import 3 images: the left part for the slider, which is going to be covering the blue, the right part for the slider, which is going to be covering the white, and then the thumb image, which again is going to be the circle. So let's go ahead and do that. Now I've got a pre-made folder here containing 3 images: custom slider left, custom slider right, and the orb, which is going to be the circle. So generally I use PNG files for Interface Builder, and there's 2 reasons. The first is that a PNG actually can be a transparent file. It can have a transparent background, so the image can be over a background that is transparent, and the iPhone will actually render this appropriately. Now additionally, I use PNGs because they're actually smaller in size, and the quality of them are still actually pretty good. So with that being said, let's go ahead and we will import these images into the project. Now take a note, our UIKit folder is right here, and our custom sliders folder is right here. Now if we import these images from the custom sliders folder into the project, they will be recognized by the project. But let's say for example you wanted to send your friend the project of UIKit. Well, the custom sliders folder would still be local on your computer, and they wouldn't have those images. So there's 2 ways we can fix this. We can either put the custom sliders folder in the UIKit folder, Or when we import our images, we can actually select a checkbox that says copy these images to the destinations directory. So let's go ahead and choose that checkbox option. So I'm going to take these 3 images, I'm going to put them under the resources folder here, and as you can see, copy items into destinations group folder if needed. So if they don't already exist, then it's going to copy them. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to click add. So our 3 images have now shown up here in the project. Now if I come into the UIKit folder, you'll see that our images have appeared in the project. Now if you have a lot of images, that can get a little sloppy, so I would recommend just taking the entire folder and dragging it in, and then once the folder is in the project, dragging your images into the project from that point. But since we're only using a couple, 3, 4, 5 images throughout the entire project, we're going to go ahead and just leave it like this. So with that being said, let's go ahead and open up our UIKitViewController.m file, and we'll type in some code to set the properties of this UI slider. So the first method we're going to use is called viewDidAppear. This method is designed to tell the view controller that its view was added to a window. So as soon as the view appears, it's going to execute whatever we put inside of the method. So let's go ahead and set up this method here. Now void is going to be our return type, and viewDidAppear. That passes in a boolean, something called bool, and animated. That is the way the documentation has the method set up. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and declare a UI image. We need to call from our resources our image names so that we can set them as properties of the UI slider. So that means we're going to need to call at least 3 images, and the first image is going to be called left track. So we're going to need to declare a new UI image, and we're going to set this to the custom slider left.png, which is what we added into our project. We're going to need to make this stretchable, so we can do that by calling stretchable image with left cap, stretchable image with left cap width. So as you can see right here, so we're gonna set the cap to 10, about 10 pixels, and the top cap height, we don't need one. So go ahead and put that in there. Go ahead and end our declaration with the semicolon. And now we need to do the exact same thing for the right image. So we're going to copy, paste this, make it a little bit more efficient, change this to right track, and custom slider right is what we have right in here, custom slider right.png. So what we need to do now is we need to set the frame of the custom slider. So we can do that by basically calling custom slider .frame. Now frame is actually a CG rect. It's basically a rectangle, and that's going to show basically the boundaries of the slider. We're going to have to set those boundaries to a clear color so that the images will override what's already there. And we can do this by calling CG rect make, which is going to make a rectangle of type CG rect. And we're going to call custom slider .frame .origin .x. This sets the x of the rectangle. Now we need to set the y, custom slider .frame .origin .y. And the reason we're doing this is because in Interface Builder, if we make it larger or smaller, it's actually going to adjust this custom slider frame for us. So if we end up changing in Interface Builder again, this will take care of all that for us. So now we need to set the width and the height. So custom slider .frame .size .width. And we're just going to make the height standard because you can't actually customize the height of the UI slider. So we're just going to set that to 26 pixels. And we have now created a rectangle for the frame. Now what we need to do is, with the custom slider, we need to set the background color to a clear color, custom slider dot background color equals UI color clear color. So this calls the clear color method of the UI color class, and it's going to set the background color property of custom slider to the clear color. Now there's going to be three methods we're going to need to call to finish up the slider. First one is going to be set thumb image. That's going to set the circle to our orb, which is what we have here in our resources. Kind of hard to see, it's a little small. And then we're going to call set minimum track image and set maximum track image. Now we'll get to that in a second, but let's go ahead and start by setting the thumb image. So this is a method, so we're going to need to call the method by starting with the left bracket and call custom slider set thumb image, and our image is going to be UI image. Make sure that's a capital I right here. Image named. Mistyped again, got to have a capital M or an N. Now we're calling this orb.png because that's the file we've loaded into our resources here. So we've got orb.png. Now go ahead and end the UI image here. Now there's another type we have to pass in, and this is for the state of the slider, and this is going to be for a normal state. Now basically states are what is the state of the slider when you actually touch the thumb image. Is it going to be are you not touching it, or is it going to be for when the thumb image should be highlighted? Basically we need to set this to a normal state because we want it to show this orb under normal conditions. So UI control state normal. Alright, so we've now set the orb. Now what we need to do is if we actually touch the orb, we don't want the orb to change colors, but we do need to set this. We do need to set the thumb image for when the state is actually highlighted. So if you were to touch it and you wanted to highlight, we can actually change the image, but we're not going to do that. So go ahead and just copy this line of code, and we'll just change the state component of this. UI control state highlighted. So that way, if the orb gets highlighted, or if you touch it with your finger, the orb is going to end up being the same. But if you want to change it, you would just add another image and change the image right there. Now what we need to do is we need to set the minimum track image, which is basically going to be the left side of the orb. Custom slider set minimum track image. Xcode will fill everything in here for you, and we're going to set the minimum track image to left track, which is what we declared right up here. And the state is, of course, going to be normal. UI control state normal. And we'll go ahead and end that. Now we need to do the same thing. Just go ahead and copy and paste, save us some typing, for the right side, which is going to be the maximum track image. So change minimum here to maximum. That's another method declared in the custom slider. That's another method declared in the UI slider class. And we're going to change this to right track. And again, for a normal state. Okay, so go ahead and save, and we're going to actually try this out and see if it works. Go ahead and save all. We've connected our IB outlets and everything. And there you have it. It is no longer the blue slider like you see right here. It is our custom slider. So that's actually really neat. Now if you want to add caps to it, what I mean by that is little rounded edge. You can actually just add in a UI image view and place it just to the left of that, and it'll look like the cap is already there. So you can go ahead and do that in your interface builder, but other than that, it looks really well. So now what we're going to talk about, since the hardest part is done, is we're going to talk about buttons. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up our UIKit view controller here. And what kind of customization does Interface Builder offer for buttons? Well, it offers a lot more than most, actually. go ahead and drag in a button here. And most of your customization options are going to be located in the inspector. So go to Tools, Inspector, and if you come here to the attributes, go ahead and make sure your button's selected. If you come in here to the attributes, you can see most of the customization options. For example, your text color, your shadow color, your title of the button. If you want an image to appear in the button, you could do that by selecting the image here. Now, one of my favorites is the fact that you can have a custom button. So we can select the custom option here, and the button, the original button style that comes defaulted with Xcode, actually disappears. And what we can do is we can go ahead and type in an image here, and our button will become an image. So that's one of my favorite things about a button, and I'm going to show you this by, we're just going to come up here and do Photoshop. If you have Adobe Photoshop, it's very great software to work with. If you don't, you can use any standard image editing software. If not, if you want to try out Photoshop, you can go to adobe.com and download a free 30-day trial if you want to try it out for this tutorial. And what we're going to do is we're just going to create a standard button, and we're going to go ahead and import that into our project. And I'm just going to call this, we'll make a red button, and we'll basically just put submit for text, just like a regular button would have. So we'll go ahead and make the width 150 and 50. I'm just kind of winging it here. So now, like I said before about transparent backgrounds, this is a transparent background. So anything we add, it's not going to have a standard, color background, and the iPhone SDK will be able to render that appropriately, which is why we're going to export it as a .png file. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here, and I'm going to make a red button, and I'm going to make the borders of this button very, very dark here. I'm going to go ahead and come up here into Photoshop and drag this button like so. So we've got a really dark looking button. Now I'm going to go ahead and add in another one of these rounded rectangles. If you don't know how to switch to rounded rectangles, by the way, you can right click on this rectangle object here and either make it a rectangle, a rounded rectangle, a circle, whatever. And you can change the radius down here, which is how curvy it is on the edges. So I'm going to leave it as is, and I'm going to make this, doesn't really matter what color I make it because we're going to go ahead and edit those properties here later in a second. So I'm going to zoom in, make sure I get this in right, and I'm going to come right up into here. Just going to come right into there, bring it down, make sure all the sides are even. That looks about right. I'm going to let go. Now I'm going to go into my layer, go to layer style, blending options, and I'm going to want a gradient, which is basically slow transition from one color to another. And I'm going to make it a dark, kind of a darker, a little bit lighter red than the border, and I'm going to make that go to an even lighter red here, and this will end up looking really nice. And if you double click the magnifying glass, that'll zoom out and show you the kind of button you've created. And what we're going to want to do now is basically add in text. Now if you click on a different layer, the outline of the layer will disappear and you can actually see how nice it looks. So we've got a button started up here. Now we can just put in some text by clicking the T right here. And I'm going to go ahead and make this all white. Zoom in a little bit more. I'm going to come right here and I'm going to type in submit, just like any standard button would say. And I'm going to go ahead and make the text a little bit larger. That's about right. Put it right here in the center. And double click the magnifying glass, and there we have a nice little submit button. So if we go to File, Save As, I'm going to save this as a PNG of type PNG, and we're going to save this in our UIKit folder. and I'm just going to call this submit button, submit BTN, short for button, and there we have it. Go ahead and get out of Photoshop here. Now let's go ahead and now it's important to know, just because we saved the button into the UIKit folder from Photoshop, that doesn't mean that the button, the image, was automatically added to the project. Okay, we need to go ahead and add this in here now by dragging submit button. We'll put it under the resources folder and add right there. Now also, it's very important to know that these folders, resources, other sources, classes, frameworks, products, they're basically non-existent in relation to your actual project directory. These are just here to help you organize the files that you have included in your project. So I have submit BTN here, submit button, and I can't put this, I can't basically add another button called submit BTN to the classes folder, because that would be a duplicate in my project. Like I said, this is basically all the files in your project, and it just helps you to organize a little bit more. But you can't have any duplicate names, no matter what folder it's in. And these folders, these groups, as Xcode likes to call them, do not correspond to the folders in your actual project destination on your computer. So keep that in mind. Now, if you want to add a new group, you can right-click anywhere and click on Add New Group, and we'll call this Images, for example. Images. Let's go ahead and bring this outside of the classes folder, and we could take all of our images and just put them in the images folder. Okay, so now we've got a button added to our project. Now go back to the interface builder, and button's hiding somewhere. We just made it. Here we go. So let's make this a little bit bigger, because we know we've got a large button right here. Now, in the image property of this button, in this attribute, we're going to go ahead and call submit BTN, which is exactly what we just added to the project. So hit enter, and now the button appears like nothing else. And the button appears no problem right near your project. Now this button can be called, and can be called through an IB action, just like any other UI button. So that's a very nice little option here, the custom. Again, it's one of my favorites. So now all of your other options for this button are located throughout the rest of this attributes section. For example, if you want it to be highlighted, it'll automatically kind of highlight your button. There's another option, user interaction enabled. So do you want users to be able to interact with that button? Shows touch on highlight. When you click it, it'll add a little white glow when you touch it. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that. We're not going to really do any actions with the buttons in this tutorial. And that basically is how you can easily configure your button properties. You can also, of course, do it in code using the set title or set text methods for the button. But if you go into the documentation and type in UI button, all those options will appear for you, and you'll be able to find out what you can do. So let's go ahead and move on to our next component, and that's going to be our progress view. This is a very simple one. We're not going to customize it with images or anything like that. Again, all the properties and attributes can be adjusted in the progress view tab. So you can see the progress. You can set that right here. I want the default to be, and it'll adjust right there. And again, in code, you can set the progress, most likely using a method called setProgress or setValue. And the style, you can either make it default or bar, which changes it to look like an actual loading bar right here. So that's pretty basic right there for you. Almost all components in the UIKit library actually have an alpha. Probably should have mentioned it before, but the alpha basically is the transparency of it. By default, it's always set to 1. If you want to make it a little bit less transparent, you can set the alpha to a little bit less. And as you can see, since I have the the UI view selected, the UI view is decreasing in transparency. Now let's go ahead and check the button right here, and we'll come down to the alpha part of this view, and we will see that it gets more and more transparent as I go more to the left. Now the reason all of these components have this alpha property is because all of these components are subclasses of a UI view, and you could do this with any UI view. Actually, you can see that right here in the tab. That see right here, view. This is where all the views properties are: mode, background, tag, drawing, stretching, etc. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the text field. And this is pretty customizable too. You can put an image behind it, like I did with the submit button, doing the same things, design in Photoshop or another photo software, and put the image behind it as a background. You could input the text or the placeholder, which is going to be basically what's showing when you get there. So let's say we want to make it a search. We'll just type in search, and as you can see, it pops in right there, and it will clear as soon as the user touches it. Now, border options, you have basically just a solid square rectangle looking border. Then we've got no border, and that's probably what you'd want to select if you put in a background for it. And you can basically just fiddle around with these borders here. Now let's go ahead and move on to a UI segmented control component. Now UI segmented control is a pretty neat little component here. You can actually do a lot of the customization yourself here in the segment. Now again, you can insert images for each little segment, and the default segment is always starting at segment 0. So it's important to know that even though it's the first segment, it's actually segment 0. The second one is segment 1, the third one is segment 2, and so on and so forth. So we can add as many segments as we want right here in Interface Builder. So let's say we want to have 5. Just go ahead and set segment to 5, hit enter, and they show up here. Now the text is obviously too wide for its individual segment, but we can go ahead and adjust each text right here. So we've selected the first segment, and we'll go ahead and just call this 1. Now if you wanted to, you can actually make each segment an image just by plugging in the image. You have to load it to your project and then have an image. I'd recommend the image be transparent, and the image will load right over the segment. I believe it will override the title. Let's just add a random image like an orb here. Yeah, and as you can see, the title disappears. So make sure you know if you want to have a title and an image, just put the title on your image. Now let's go ahead and customize the second segment. We'll just call this segment 2, and the third you can just call 3. Whoops. The fourth, segment 4, and the fifth one, segment 5. So you can easily customize the title and the images for your UI segmented view before you even mess with any of the code. Now you can also, of course, adjust the style if you want it plain or bordered or a bar, basically whatever you choose. And again, the alpha property is right here, so if you want to make it a little bit more transparent or you have an image behind it, it's all right there. We've got 2 more we're going to work with. We're going to work with the switch, which is very easy, and the UI label, and that's going to wrap up the tutorial. So let's go ahead and go to the UI switch here. So with the UI switch, there's really not that much you can do with the UI switch. At this point in time, there's really no way to customize the switch. Okay, so basically you can start it by default on or off, and again mess with the alpha. And that is all Apple really wants you to be able to do with the UI switches. So those are pretty strict with what you're able to do with the switches. The UI label used to be a little bit more strict, but Apple has since added more fonts and whatnot for the label. So let's go ahead and show you how to mess with the UI labels here. Now we'll come in here, we'll add in a label. Now basically what you're going to want to do with the label is drag it as wide as you think it could possibly be. Now if you don't make it as wide as you think it would possibly go, then it's going to end up only fitting in this little segment here, or however big you make the rectangle for the label. And so let's say we make the text, a sentence. You'll see that it gets cut off. It tries to get smaller and smaller until it can't get any smaller anymore, and then at a certain point it eventually just adds periods. Now let's say we knew we were going to have a big sentence. We just make it wide and it pops in right there. So that's important to know. However wide you want it to go is how big you need to make the rectangle. Now to quickly, without going into some further settings, to quickly increase the size of the font, you can just hold down the command button, the shift, and hit the plus symbol. Make sure your label selected, command, shift, plus, and you can keep hitting plus as many times as you want. Now to decrease, you only hit command and minus. No need for the shift when you're subtracting from the font size. Now if we want to change the color of the UI labels and the font, we can go to the color property here, and we can basically move around the circle here for the colors and change the font to whatever color we want. So we've selected red. Now we'll come here and we see that it says hello, my name is Zach in red. Apple has added a lot more fonts since the first SDK was released. So here in the font property we can select from a whole bunch of fonts. Fun fonts. You can see it gets there in cursive and whatnot. And then you can go through the whole list of all fonts, make it bold, condensed, light, and then of course here you can also change the size to whatever you want. But like I said before, it's a lot easier if you just use the command, shift, and plus sign. One thing that's nice about changing the font is it actually adjusts. Well, changing the font through the fonts window is it actually adjusts the size of the label for you. So that's very nice to know. That will basically wrap up the customization of the UIKit components. It's actually pretty simple, and most of it can be done through the Attributes tab. The UI slider and the UI buttons are my personal favorite because you can basically put in your own images and customize them however you want. I mean, of course you can do that with the text boxes and a few others, but those are just some of the most customizable components in the UIKit library. This is going to wrap up the UIKit Components tutorial for today. Thanks for watching. My name is Zach from mycodeteacher.com. I'll see you next time.